If your business runs on 5 different apps, 12 browser tabs, and one spreadsheet that everyone's afraid to touch, it's probably time for Odoo. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that connects every part of your business into one powerful, easy-to-use platform. So instead of wasting time switching between disconnected systems, your entire business works together in real time. Your team moves faster, your data stays accurate, and you can actually focus on growing your business. Let one unified system run your entire business. From the first opportunity to the final payment, everything works together in one place. Whether you're a small business or managing a large operation, Odoo gives you the flexible platform built to grow with you. Try it today for free at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast, a space to pause, breathe, and come back to yourself, even in the middle of a full and busy life. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and in each episode, we explore mindfulness for real life, simple practices, reflections, tools to help you feel grounded, present, and connected to what matters most to you. So let's settle in and let's get centered. Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and I am so glad you are here. In today's episode, I get to interview Lauren Chambers, who is a certified nutrition and hormone health coach. She is the cookbook author of Hormone Healthy Eats and is the founder of So Fresh and So Green, a business dedicated to providing clients and women everywhere with delicious recipes and simple tips to help them feel and look their best. Lauren came out with her new cookbook a few months ago, and I knew I wanted to have her on the podcast to share with us knowledge about how we can practice staying centered when it comes to fueling our bodies, nourishing our systems, especially when we start to think about our hormone health. I'm currently in my own hormone health eating era, really trying to explore how am I nourishing my body, fueling my body in alignment with my hormones. Wisdom that Lauren drops today is so helpful, so empowering. We'll leave this episode with not only so much information, but awareness on how you can take tangible steps in your life to take charge of your own hormone health. So wherever you are listening to this episode, maybe on a walk, cooking in the kitchen, commuting, I welcome you to settle in and let's get centered. Lauren, welcome to the Center in the City podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be here.
We were just saying before I hit record how it's been like over 10 years since we first connected. So this is really such a delight to have you on the podcast to talk about your new book, to just share all of the wisdom you've accumulated over the years with the Center in the City community. And I'd love to begin by having you share with us, when was the last time you didn't feel centered, and how did you support yourself coming back to center, whatever that means to you?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I honestly, I feel like that's been happening a lot lately. There's just been a lot going on in my personal life and with like family members being sick. So I think for me, breath is really important. And I think for me, I try and do a walk every morning by myself. And I have this trail, it goes by this river, and I'll like put in a meditation. But I feel like if I can do a walk and just be by myself for a little bit every day, that's so like grounding and centering to me. But definitely like focusing on my breath, because when I'm not feeling centered, my breath is like so shallow, and it's just like I'm getting into that fight or flight state with my nervous system. So I'd say those two things are like really important and helpful. That's a good question.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate you just mentioning, like, I haven't been centered a lot because I think we assume that we should be centered all the fucking time in our life, but it's like life is so full of these ups and downs, sicknesses, diagnosis, stress. I think the practice isn't like, how do we stay centered all the time, but how do we just learn to keep coming back to ourselves? So I'm hearing breath being really important to you in these maybe more short-term moments, and then just having those consistent solo walks,
Yep.
if you can fit in a meditation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's more about like building resistance and building that pathway and being able to go back to that and have your tools. So you're like, okay, I can use this tool when I'm feeling this way. Cause yeah, there's no way I'm feeling centered all the time or anybody is. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think this brings us right into what I want to dive into around hormones. Like hormones, this topic of hormones, I know
Mhm.
you've been an expert for many years in the conversation around hormones and nourishing our body when it comes to hormones. I feel like my Instagram feed is just flooded with so much content about
Yeah.
perimenopause. And even though I'm not there yet, and I'm like, what else? Like, just PCOS being renamed and, like all of these aspects of our hormones. But as women, we're not really taught to understand our hormones. And I think also there's this conversation of what's us, and I say us, like each of us individually, but collectively as women, what is ours to take responsibility of, to like emotionally, to personally regulate, and what is also our hormones,
Yeah.
and how they affect our mental health, our well-being, our energy, like they're this building block. So can you share a little bit more about what inspired you to get into the world of hormones and nutrition, and tell us, even just like educate us a little bit more about like hormones and how they connect to our
Mhm.
female cycle?
Yeah. Well, yeah, what inspired me was I already had my practice in nutrition and I was coaching a ton of female clients and they were relaying all of these symptoms they were experiencing. And I knew this was kind of just when hormones were first coming on the scene. Like nobody was really talking about them back then. And they were talking about all of these symptoms. And I personally was still experiencing a lot of the same symptoms. And I'm like, I don't really feel equipped to help them with this because I have these same things and I don't really know what's going on. And it made me kind of question it because I had really normalized it and thought that was just, a normal part of being a woman. So
What were the symptoms?
oh gosh, irregular cycles. I wasn't tracking my cycle. I had no idea when it was coming. They were trying to get pregnant. I didn't know anything about ovulation. I thought you could get pregnant any day of the month. Weight gain was huge. There was a real focus on like losing weight or inability to lose weight, stress, sleep issues, anxiety, depression, digestive issues, breakouts, were a big one. So yeah, all of these different symptoms that we kind of thought were just normal parts, maybe, of being a woman. So I went back to school where I was accredited in nutrition to do hormone health. And it was there that I learned that while all these symptoms are very common, 90% of women in the US report experiencing some sort of symptom, uncomfortable or debilitating symptom in the week leading up to their period. They're not actually normal. They're really common, but they're not normal. They're a symptom that something's off with your hormones, or there's an imbalance, or maybe an underlying condition going on, and that we can reduce or even completely reverse symptoms through nutrition and lifestyle shifts. So that felt really empowering to me because I was always, ever since I first got my period, was just kind of in the victim mindset or mode with my hormones. Like, this is just it. This is what we have to deal with. I didn't know a single other woman who like had a positive outlook on her period. Like it was just something that everyone hated. Um, and so that was really empowering for me. And so I started implementing shifts. I started, yeah, learning about my cycle and the phases and things I could do with each phase that would support my hormonal fluctuations, and started helping my clients do the same. And then over time, it was like all the symptoms were significantly less intense, or they just like went away altogether. And so that was really, really inspiring to me and something like I think all women should know. And of course, food is a huge part of that equation. So that's why I emphasize the food in the cookbook a lot too, just because that makes a huge difference. But that's something also people and a lot of women struggle with in general. But yeah, I wanted every woman to know, like, you don't have to feel crappy 1 to 2 weeks every month, which is a huge portion of your life. You can actually feel and look your best, and you don't have to be, restrictive eating or white knuckling it or not enjoying your life. It can actually be really beautiful and enjoyable too. So.
I love that reframe and empowerment of how women can reclaim their cycle, can normalize these symptoms and like use these symptoms as entry points to get more curious about like what we're feeding ourselves, how we're nurturing ourselves. I've been on my own journey of exploring my hormones. I always thought like intuitive eating, like I'm very in tune to what my body wants. And I started to notice, I want to say a few months ago, I started craving more animal protein. I'm not a huge animal protein person. I definitely still eat meat, but it was very much more plant-based. But I started craving more animal protein. And then I started wearing a glucose continuous monitor for a month to just gain some data. And I realized that I wasn't eating enough protein, specifically in the mornings. Like I would just have like half a banana with peanut butter and like call that my breakfast. And I was not eating enough protein for my body in the morning to then set my blood sugar and my hormones up for success the rest of the day. And so that's been a huge shift. And I know everybody's talking about protein and everybody's talking about fiber now. And like, there are all these themes, but it really did kind of shake because I intuitively was craving more meat, I was like, oh, how interesting. But intuitively, I wouldn't eat that much. Like I wouldn't eat 4 eggs for breakfast. And now I'm like making myself eat 4 eggs for breakfast. So I'm curious, how do you balance when working with your clients or even just in your own journey, that balance of like being intuitive and mindful as you eat and nourish your body, and also, hey, there's some science behind here.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I do think, knowledge isn't everything. Like you said, it's a little bit of a combo, but I do think knowledge is power and it is really empowering. And for me personally, I was someone who was on the diet hamster wheel for decades. So food was very like black and white to me. Like I should eat this, I shouldn't eat this. I felt comfortable like following a plan that told me what to eat. Definitely not intuitive, but that was kind of where my headspace was at for a long time. So I would naturally get cravings and like, yeah, say for red meat, or I'd be more hungry. And I wouldn't listen to my body because I thought like, oh no, I'm a woman. I'm not supposed to eat this much meat, or, I'm supposed to eat more lighter foods or only this many calories per day, or I can't have this much fat, or whatever the trend was at the time. And so what was really helpful for someone like me with that rigidity to lean into it was to understand how our hormones work and the ebbs and flows, especially of our menstrual cycle. So I think for women, one of the biggest ones is the luteal phase, and that's the 12 to 14 days leading up to our period. So what's happening hormonally here is that progesterone is rising, and that is a thermogenic hormone that is like stabilizing and rendering our uterine lining receptive for a possible egg implantation. So it's trying to prepare us to potentially get pregnant. And we either are pregnant or then we have our period. But if you think of it that way, so it's trying to get us to eat more. It's increasing our metabolic rate, and we need to be eating more calories during that phase. That's why we're naturally hungrier during that phase. And so, this is where I think a lot of women struggle with, because they might naturally feel hungrier, but not understand what's going on and think like, no, I can't eat that much. Or, and then what happens is actually it's like destabilizing their blood sugar. It's impacting PMS. It's causing the mood swings. It's intensifying their cravings. And then maybe eventually we give in and we eat the whole pan of brownies or whatever it might be. And then we feel awful and then like try and restrict or get back on that hamster wheel again. So I think like being able to understand where you're at in your cycle and it might not always line up, but be like, oh, no wonder I'm hungry, or like I'm probably about 2 to 3 days out from my period, and like this is my body telling me I need to eat a little bit more and like maybe bulk up my meals or add in a snack. And that's like okay. It's okay. We're not our hormones aren't static every day. They're ebbing and flowing throughout the cycle. So that was really like helpful for me, at least to realize, oh, this is why I'm feeling this way. There's nothing wrong with me. It's not that I don't have any willpower. It's like our physiology, and if we can support it, I know it seems counterintuitive, but if you support it actually by eating more and adding in more nutrients, you're going to feel better. You're going to have more energy. You're not going to have those cravings. You're going to sleep better, negate PMS, and then ultimately it's going to just set you up for the other phases in your cycle. So, yeah.
I love this. And you use in your book, Hormone Healthy Eats, you map it out connected to the female cycle. And so tell us a little bit more, give us a snapshot of, if you can, of what the other phases are asking of our bodies. And I know in your book, you have like all these beautiful, delicious recipes and inspirations of how to nourish ourselves for that specific cycle, which I think is great. Because like I've even been shifting my perspective when I'm going to the grocery store now. It's like, okay, am in my luteal phase. This phase needs a little bit more red meat than I am in my other phases, or I maybe need a little bit more omega-3s or fat. And so I'm thinking about what products I'm buying at the grocery store now, connecting to my cycle. And it's a very different way of shopping than I used to. So inspire us a little bit about like what should we be doing, and maybe even take out the should, but like what would help our bodies when we're in the follicle phase?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, that's amazing that you're doing that. I'm curious that are you like feeling any better or noticing any shifts or?
Well, I'm buying a lot more animal protein. It's funny, and my husband is like, "Wow, like hungry girl." Like it's funny. It's like our way of cooking is definitely shifting, and because I've been doing it for the last few months, definitely it feels good to be eating more protein, I'll just say. Like I'm noticing like that part. I'm like, "Oh, I was probably way under eating protein."
Yeah, that totally makes sense too, because protein is the most satiating macronutrient. And I notice the difference and feel the same way. And especially like you said at breakfast, like if I don't get enough at breakfast, I'm hungry like an hour or two later. It's just I notice that for sure. So that's amazing. So going into the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, like you mentioned, so that's how the cookbook's set up. So it's 25 recipes per phase. And then it talks about like what's going on and why these foods help your hormones during the phase. So it starts with the menstrual phase, and each phase is synced up with a season, which I think also helps make it seem more intuitive when you're grocery shopping or focusing on certain foods. So, for example, menstruation is your period, it's winter. You are shedding your uterine lining. And so you're losing blood and with that nutrients. So lots of minerals, especially like iron and zinc that you need for energy and for functioning hormones and to feel good. So we want to be replenishing those lost minerals. And like you said, animal protein is one of the best ways to do that, especially like red meat has some of the most bioavailable iron, heme iron. So it's really easy for your body to intake and absorb. A lot of like the slow cooker or, like toss a big chuck roast or whatever in the crock pot and just let it cook all day, or more like hearty meats and stews rich in animal protein, bone broth, which is rich in like collagen and amino acids. Those all aid in tissue repair. So they're going to help restore the minerals and help you build this new mineral rich uterine lining, which is going to carry you through the rest of your cycle. Also, in traditional Chinese medicine, this is like winter, a cold phase of your cycle. So you want to be eating like warming foods that are warming to the womb. A cold uterus is seen as linked to fertility challenges and painful cramps. And so, cultures like traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda all recommend like more of those warming foods. So it's a more like warming, hearty, um, big emphasis on the animal proteins. And then we move in from there to our follicular phase. So that begins the day your period ends. And that's really all about teeing you up for ovulation. So your follicles are starting to grow. That means that estrogen is then ramping up. They're producing estrogen, and testosterone is ramping up as well. So those are really like, so this is like the spring phase of the cycle. And so you are like, okay, I'm done hibernating. I'm ready to come out of winter. And, I've got new energy. I want to try new things. I'm feeling more confident. Your appetite is starting to become a bit more suppressed because estrogen's a natural appetite suppressant. So you might find, yeah, you're not as hungry as you are in your menstrual phase, and you'll find you're craving like more lighter, brighter foods like you would find at the spring farmers market. And there's actual physiological reason for this, just like with everything, because those are rich in antioxidants and those are going to fight off oxidative stress. So it's like building this really protective environment for when you release an egg, like a very healthy environment, because free radicals could damage the egg quality. And then from there, you go into ovulation. And so that's like peak summer vibes. You're feeling yourself, you want to see and be seen. This is when your libido is probably at your highest because it's your fertile window. So your body is like programming you to be in the mood. And then just think the same thing, like the lighter, brighter, fresher foods, the peak produce that you'd find at the summer farmers market. Of course, you want to still be eating protein and enough fats, but you just, again, might not feel as hungry or craving as like more cozy foods as you would in the other phases. And then from there, once you ovulate, a follicle ruptures and it releases an egg into the fallopian tube in hopes of implantation. And then that ruptured follicle turns into its own little endocrine gland, and it's called the corpus luteum. And that starts producing progesterone. And then progesterone starts taking over. And that is like your cool, calm, relaxing hormone. So you're going to start to feel more inward. Like I mentioned, it's a thermogenic hormone. So it's increasing your metabolic rate. So you're going to start to feel a bit more hungrier. And this is kind of like the fall season. So after summer, you're turning a bit more inward. You're like getting prepared for winter. You might feel really like this strong desire to complete tasks, sort of check things off the list, get things done, and then maybe more like self-care. And then also you're craving a bit more like carbs, like think the sweet potatoes and the squash and more complex carbs. Those are really important for your mood and for producing serotonin. They're going to help with PMS and they're going to help stabilize blood sugars. So yeah, you want to be, if there were ever a time to like focus on making sure you're eating enough during your cycle, I mean, it really ideally every day is important, but this is really like the key, and especially breakfast too, and getting that protein rich breakfast because your blood sugar is less stable too. And cortisol is more reactive. There's more inflammation going on, which can cause cramping. So anything that can help reduce cramping, like you mentioned, omega-3s. So like salmon, sardines, anything, turmeric, things that are anti-inflammatory are really going to help with that too. And then if you're not pregnant, then eventually you start shedding your uterine lining, you're in your menstrual phase, and the whole cycle starts over again.
Wow, I love that you loop them to the seasons. And I think that's a really beautiful way to just visualize this like natural cycle and season our body goes through every month. And so if listeners are listening and thinking, huh, like when I am in my ovulation summer era, what things should people be paying attention to notice like, maybe something might be off with my hormones?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really important question. So yeah, everyone's a little different and it might depend. There are so many different factors that influence your hormones too. So, one, I think just getting in touch with your cycle and starting to track is such a great way because then you can sort of pinpoint like, is this my norm? Because what someone else's norm might be different, or have a different baseline or I'm pretty like regular. I know what's going to happen. But if I have like a more stressful season, then things can shift and I can immediately pinpoint like, oh yeah, it's because I'm going through this stressful time and my body's feeling it. But I would say in general, if you're trying to figure out, is there something off with my hormones? Is this warranted to look at? I would say first knowing that again, like your hormones are ebbing and flowing throughout your cycle. So it's very normal to feel those shifts because they influence everything. So throughout your cycle, it's normal to feel shifts in your mood or your appetite or your endurance or your energy or productivity. But I'd say when it's worth looking at is if those shifts are uncomfortable, painful, embarrassing, debilitating, if they're starting to interfere with your quality of life in some way. So if something's painful, if you're having like bad cramps and you have to take Midol, or it's keeping you from going out and doing something or going to work because of a heavy period. If you're having really bad headaches or migraines, embarrassing breakouts, if you feel like you're doing all the things and you just can't seem to lose weight or you keep gaining weight, if your hair's thinning, if you're having trouble getting pregnant or staying pregnant, um, sleep issues, anxiety, depression, like those are all obviously impacting your quality of life. And again, they're common, but they're not normal. So that would be when I'd say, yeah, if something feels off, it doesn't feel right, it's really getting in the way of you living your best life, then absolutely it's time to start investigating and figuring out what the root cause is and how you can support your hormones.
That's so helpful to give listeners a map of just like, huh, when is it something? Because I think we can start to like blame the self, like what am I doing wrong versus thinking of like, okay, some of our building blocks maybe need some extra love or need some other support here. And one of the common things that I'm hearing in some of my coaching sessions is that women are being diagnosed with PCOS. I now know named PMOS. And I'm curious, like, what can people be doing? What can women be doing who maybe are getting this diagnosis? How can they be shifting how they're eating or paying attention to their blood sugar differently?
Yeah. Well, I think the name change is exciting because I mean, it doesn't fix all the problems, but it's a step in the right direction because PCOS stood for polycystic ovarian syndrome. So there was a heavy emphasis on the ovaries to get a diagnosis. One of the biggest diagnosis criteria was to have an ultrasound and look for cysts. And most women with the condition didn't have those. They're not even cysts, they're arrested follicles. So this equated to many women living with this condition and not getting a diagnosis and not getting the support they need. So now it's been renamed as of last month, May, to polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome. So it's multi-system. It's not just the ovaries. The ovaries are actually impacted downstream by changes in the endocrine system. So looking at hormones like insulin and male hormones, androgens like testosterone, and then metabolic, so blood sugar, which is present in like 85% of cases. So that's a huge, huge pillar. So what is amazing, And then those impact the ovaries, and then that can lead to the anovulatory cycles, the fertility challenges. So it's like addressing the first two is then going to help regulate your cycle, your sex hormones. So one of the biggest pillars to focus on first, that's very research backed, is balancing your blood sugar. So like you're saying, you're already doing one of the best things, like front loading your protein at breakfast. That's a great way to start. Ideally, you want to be dispersing it throughout the day and eating enough with each meal. But breakfast is really great because you've already been fasting all night. So if you're then skipping breakfast or like putting something more, just with carbs or maybe a little bit of fat, that's going to set you up on that blood sugar roller coaster the rest of the day, like you were saying. So emphasizing a protein-rich breakfast, having a source of protein and fat and fiber derived from a carbohydrate at every meal. Those are the three macronutrients. And when they're combined, that really helps to keep your blood sugar stable. It's going to ward off cravings. It's going to help you feel fuller longer, keep your energy stable. And then little things like, going for a walk for 10 minutes after a meal. Strength training is huge, strength and resistance training. And that's something that I've also, within the past couple years, really gotten into. I've definitely had my phases of all the different workouts, and I like a lot of different ones. But for me, that has made a noticeable difference in like my metabolism, my body composition, like just how strong and good I feel. And I know it's going to help into perimenopause and aging and beyond. But good, dense muscle mass is so important for metabolic health. I'm trying to think of what some other little good blood sugar balancing hacks are. I can come back to that one, but that would be one. And that would be, a great one to focus on. Eating consistently. So trying to eat 3 meals per day around the same time. That's really key for keeping blood sugar from dipping too low or going too high. And you probably would notice that too with your continuous glucose monitor if you like skipped a meal or waited too long. And probably feel like I can feel it personally in my body, like my blood sugar dropping, and then I get like dizzy or sweaty. So just staying really consistent with your meals, loading up on nutrients, focusing on protein, never eating a naked carb. So just like a carb or a sweet on its own. So kind of like if you're going to have a sweet treat, have it after a meal, not in the middle of the day when you haven't eaten anything. Or if you're going to have a piece of toast, put like some avocado and an egg on it. Because if you're just eating a naked carb, it's just going to spike and crash your blood sugar.
Does that mean pizza is like a no-go unless it has some good protein on it?
I know. Yeah, pizza's really hard because even if it does have which I'll try and, if ever I get it, order something with like chicken but it's usually such a small amount and I can feel it and I'll eat a bunch of pizza and then I'm still like hungry, but I'm not. It's a weird feeling. I'm like, oh, that's because I haven't gotten enough protein. So, I actually have a recipe in my cookbook. It's like the Italian chopped salad, and it's got like chickpeas and mozzarella and Parmesan. But if you can like pair something like that with your pizza to help just so it's not just like the carbs and the cheese. I know this for me, that helps make a big difference because, yeah, otherwise I can just feel it impacting my body in a very different way. So
100%. I love putting salad on my pizza too. But that's a great like attention invitation of like, okay, what can I add in here if there's something, or if I'm at a party or a potluck or a barbecue, like what can my plate look like so that it is having all of those balanced components for my blood sugar?
exactly. And not to get too off track, but yeah, having that add in versus the takeaway mentality, that's going to be so much more sustainable too than like, oh, I can't eat the pizza altogether. And you love pizza. Like, that's going to be so hard to maintain versus like, oh, I'm going to have some pizza, but I'm going to pair it, yeah, with this salad with some protein on it or a side or something like that that's going to help keep my blood sugar stable. So I think it's also really like a lot more freeing when you look at it that way too, from the lens of like keeping blood sugar stable versus like, no, I just can't eat these foods altogether. Like, oh, I can have dessert, but I'm going to feel better, or a treat if I have it at the end of a meal where I've already had my protein and stuff. So yeah, I love that. That's a great point. The other two I would just touch on would be stress, is a big one, and then inflammation is another big one for PMOS. So stress, obviously, no way to avoid it in today's world. But if you can, like, focus on habits that are going to help with your sleep. That's huge for offsetting stress. Right. So, and for me, the one of the biggest things I've noticed is that starts with the morning, not just your nightly routine, but like how you wake up and start your day. And especially if you can get some sunlight or some sun exposure first thing or as close to as you can when you wake up in the morning, because that really sets your sleep wake cycle and circadian rhythm for the day. So it's literally priming cortisol, your stress hormone, so that it is highest in the morning, midday, and then it's winding down so you can then get a good night's sleep at night. And then finding ways to reduce stressors or reduce your exposure to stress. So that might look like reducing toxins in your home, like when you're close to running out of your dish soap, like maybe you can order one that's less toxic the next time and start there. Don't just, I don't recommend going and dumping out everything, and that can be overwhelming, but just doing that, or like maybe that is not checking the news as much, or certain little ways, or delegating a task that's stressing you out, asking for help, ways that you can reduce stress in your everyday life, and then also looking at ways you can build your stress resilience, kind of like the question you asked me about being centered. Like, can you add in some breath work or a walk that are going to help offset those stressors? And then lastly, for reducing inflammation, I think, again, toxin exposure is huge for reducing inflammation. Your diet, so cooking more at home, amazing for reducing inflammation. Most restaurants are adding things in that aren't great for inflammation in your hormones, but they're cheaper, like certain oils. So cooking more at home, eating lots of anti-inflammatory foods, like the colorful fruits and veggies and the omega-3 fatty rich fish, and eggs. And then supporting your menstrual cycle is huge for reducing inflammation too. So those would be the three pillars that I would mention: balancing blood sugar, reducing stress, and reducing inflammation. And I think if most people started there and just focused on there, you would find a significant reduction in symptoms, if not completely reverse them. So I think that's pretty amazing that we have that capability ourselves to do.
Yeah, that's amazing and empowering, and also crazy of like our bodies, our systems are so sensitive to what we put in them, what we surround ourselves with, just how they have such a big impact on our building blocks internally. And for somebody who's listening, that's like, this all sounds great. I'm inspired, but I'm also overwhelmed. What would be like one place you would start? Because I love your approach, Lauren, that you're not like, go clean out everything and dump everything that's toxic. And you're not one of those like, I appreciate the more balanced approach of like, well, maybe the next time, like just look for a better, cleaner product here. I think that's a very gentle way to welcome somebody into thinking about their environment and their space and their choices.
Wow.
What would be like one place that somebody could begin to just even begin finding some more balance in their hormones?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And I would say if there was one thing, it would be approaching each meal with that add in versus takeaway mentality, and being like, okay, I think if you can have a basic understanding, what is a protein? What is fat? What is fiber look like? I outline all of that in my cookbook and like the recipes and what contains what. So even if you're just cooking out of there, that might be a little shortcut. But you don't need to know all the grams. You don't need to count your macros, nothing like that. But just knowing kind of those pillars because those are, the building blocks of our hormones, and then they contain vitamins and minerals, which are also so important for our hormones. So looking at every plate you're building and being like, okay, do I have a protein? Do I have a fat? Do I have a source of fiber? What can I add to this that is going to support my blood sugar so that I'm not hungry an hour later to help me feel better and support my hormones? And the great thing is a lot of those like add a lot of flavor and taste too. So it's a fun and more enjoyable way to eat rather than, again, going back to like, oh, I shouldn't have this sugar or I shouldn't have these carbs. So like if you're having some yogurt for breakfast, can I add some berries on here and some seeds like chia seeds for a little fiber and antioxidants? If I'm having a salad for lunch, can I have some chicken and some avocado, maybe like some artichoke hearts for fiber? And then for dinner, if you're doing tacos, like maybe you can add a cabbage slaw on top, or some guacamole. Just like looking for little ways, again, that you can add more to your plate that's going to be more supportive of your hormones and taste good too.
I love that invitation to just expand and think more abundantly than restrict and tighten. It sounds like such a more joyful way to approach food and to care for ourselves. And I think everybody should get your cookbook, Hormone Healthy Eats, because it's just so beautiful, so inspiring. I can't wait to try your brownie recipe that I keep seeing you post about. Every time I'm like, okay, I need to come back to this. I need to come back to it. It looks so good. Lauren, where can people learn more about you, your book, your work?
Yeah. Well, I am actually also making that brownie recipe tomorrow because I am in my luteal phase and I'm craving them big time. I'm like, this makes total sense. So, I cannot wait for you to try those. But, my book, yeah, cookbook, Hormone Healthy Eats. So, all online and major book retailers, wherever books are sold. Then I also have a Substack, which is called Hormone Healthy Eats. It's kind of like an extension of the cookbook, and that I put out new recipes and content every week. I have my website, So Fresh and So Green, kind of like the Outcast song. And then I also have my Instagram, So Fresh and So Green. So those would be probably all the spots.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Centered in the City podcast. I welcome you to take a moment to pause as so much wisdom was just shared in this episode and think about your own relationship to your health, to nutrition, to food and fuel and nourishment. And think about what is one takeaway you have from today, one insight that you gained, whether it's something new or something you just remembered or something you're inspired to try. Maybe it's you want to slow the days down and start to track your cycle, get more curious about your hormones and start to map them out. Maybe you're curious to eat more intentionally in alignment with your cycle. Maybe you just want to practice having more consistent meals or adding some movement after your meals. Whatever it is, take a moment to think of that takeaway and then ask yourself, what does this get to look like to implement this takeaway into my life this next week? So this isn't just something cool you learned on a podcast, but you're actually taking this information to support you staying centered in your life. And I know Lauren and I would love to hear what's coming alive for you. So reach out to us on Instagram at OneWade, at So Fresh and So Green. And of course, check out Lauren's new book, Hormone Healthy Eats, and I'll link it in the show notes. Thank you for being here. As always, take a moment to share this episode with somebody in your life that needs to hear it. And until next time, stay centered.